Hi, welcome back to Harmonize Your Life Conversations on Self-Care for Women of Color podcast with your host, Dr.Toni G. Alvarado. I'm so excited to invite you back into the podcast studio as we continue with season 12 of the podcast. Our second episode of season 12 begins with this episode today. We have been having conversations around radical self-love and heart health. As you see, I'm wearing my self-care Go Red sweatshirt this today. And I am so excited about our guest for today because our conversation today is going to center around heart health, and particularly heart health for our children. And so I am so excited about all the things that we are doing with the Harmonize Your Life Women's Self-Care Network, with the podcasts, the retreats, and all the things that we do to bring this type of information, motivation, and inspiration to our podcast community. So I want you to get ready, and you might want to take some notes on this one. And I'm certainly hoping that you're going to share this podcast episode because I believe this information is vital to our community, to the health of our community. So I'll be right back with my next guest right after this. All right. Well, I am excited to have a new voice to the Harmonize Your Life podcast community. And I'm delighted that we were able to make this connection and bring her in to help us with this conversation. Dr. Michelle Wallace is a pediatric cardiologist with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta Cardiology. She is an assistant professor of pediatrics at Emory School of Medicine and an adjunct professor of pediatrics at Morehouse School of Medicine. A proud graduate of Georgetown University and Morehouse School of Medicine, she completed pediatric residency at Children's National Medical Center and cardiology fellowship at Duke University Medical Center. Her clinical interests include management of patients with dyslipidemia. Am I saying that right?
Dyslipidemia. High cholesterol.
Prenatal management of congenital heart disease and general care of patients with congenital heart disease from birth to adolescence. She is the medical director for the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta Preventative Cardiology Program, chair of the Emory Department of Pediatrics DEI Committee, and co-chair of the Emory School of Medicine's African American Women's Collaborative. In recognition of her clinical and diversity, equity, and inclusion work, she has been honored with the Emory School of Medicine Site-Based Award for Children's Healthcare of Atlanta and the Emory Women of Excellence Award for Distinguished Leadership. She has also been recognized over multiple years by Georgia Trend magazine and Atlanta magazine as a top doctor. In her free time, Dr. Wallace enjoys traveling, Detroit ballroom dancing, Chicago stepping, hiking, and completing community service with her sorority, our sorority, the Sisters of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Welcome to the podcast, soror, Dr. Michelle C. Wallace. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Toni Alvarado. It is wonderful. It's an honor to be here and speaking with you today.
Oh, wow. I'm glad to have you here. We were connected through my sister-in-law, who is a soror as
Yes.
well,
Yes.
Dr. Anastasia Alvarado,
Yes.
who is there with you at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, Morehouse School of Medicine, all
Mhm.
those things.
Yes.
So we were at dinner a few weeks ago, and I was sharing with her that I really wanted to bring a cardiologist on this month to the podcast. And she was like, "Oh, I have just the person for you." She said, "Well, now she does pediatric cardiology." And I said, "Well, you know what? That's a subject we have not broached on the podcast." So I said, "Why not? Let's have her." Because yeah, as women of color and women in general, what goes on with our children impacts our health as well, right? And
Absolutely.
so if our kids aren't well, we're not well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, and so self-care includes our children and our families. And
Mhm.
so when she said, yeah, that your specialty was pediatric cardiology, I was like, that's perfect. Because we need to have this conversation about heart health for our children. As a matter of fact, I named this episode Heart Health Go Red for Our Children.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Red for our children, right? And I'm rocking my self-care Go Red sweatshirt. And I'll say more about that a little later on. But yeah, so let's talk about this subject of heart health for our children. We when we spoke on the phone prior to setting everything up, I was just intrigued by some of the things that you were sharing about this subject and what's happening with our children when it comes to cardiovascular disease. And so yeah, let's dig into it. Talk to us about just in general your work
Mhm.
and what a pediatric cardiologist is.
Yeah. So
Or
a
does.
Go ahead. Well, a pediatric cardiologist really is a physician that specializes in the care of children's hearts. Um, and while a lot of our work surrounds congenital heart disease, so heart disease that you are born with, so your heart is malformed in some way, you have holes in your heart or abnormal valves, or your heart is put together in a different manner, or you're dealing with abnormal heart rhythms. Those are all things that we think about that's a little bit different from your your adult cardiologist, right? Who thinks a lot about abnormal heart rhythms similarly, but they also think a lot more about what we traditionally think of as heart disease. So the developing or managing the risk factors that could lead to early heart attacks and strokes, right?
Mhm.
And while what's really interesting as a pediatric cardiologist is that what we used to think of managing those risk factors as something that only fell in the adult cardiology realm or your adult primary care realm.
Mhm.
But what we're actually noticing now is that this is actually becoming more of an issue for children as well. And so we're placing a greater emphasis on, the similar risk factors like high blood pressure and high cholesterol in
Mhm.
children. And so this is compared to the adult population, it's a little bit newer space for the pediatricians in the group, but very important because we know a lot of the things that we are noticing in adulthood have actually tracked from childhood into adulthood. And so it's worth us spending the time to address it in children as well. So that's kind of how we differ a little bit. We cover some similar things, but definitely the piece that allows us to stand out from most adult cardiologists is the fact that we also deal with children who have congenital heart disease. And that's something that adult cardiologists don't train in traditionally.
Okay. And I know when we spoke on the phone, you said that even some of the diseases that we deal with as adults were probably things that we did not catch as children or weren't detected because maybe we weren't looking for those things
Mhm.
in our childhood or adolescent years. So, what would you say are some of the factors? Am I correct to hear? Am I hearing you correct to
Mhm.
say that we're seeing more incidents of children with high blood pressure and high cholesterol and cardiovascular diseases?
Yeah, so we actually are. We are noticing that more and more children are being diagnosed with high blood pressure and high cholesterol. And it's not, in the past, for instance, we used to think that high blood pressure in children was primarily a secondary issue, right? So this was due to having kidney disorder or thyroid disorder. Those used to be the primary causes of children having high blood pressure. But really, since the 90s, we've noticed that with the epidemic of obesity that we are seeing,
Mhm.
that more and more
Childhood
children.
obesity, you mean?
Hmm?
You mean
Childhood obesity,
childhood
exactly. Childhood obesity,
obesity.
that we are actually noticing that more children have what we call essential hypertension, where they don't have any issues with their kidney or their thyroid, etc. But they have it because of the lifestyles that they are leading and the foods that they're eating. We're also noticing that more and more children have high cholesterol, like you mentioned. So when we think about in general, like about 20% of teenagers have high cholesterol. And when you think about those teenagers that are obese, that number doubles to about 40%, right?
Mm.
So we're seeing that more and more. And a lot of it really seems to be related to the change in lifestyle for our children, right? Compared to when we were younger. And also the diets that
Mhm.
we now consume compared to a lot of us a lot of the adults that we used to consume when we were younger.
Yeah. Children aren't as mobile, maybe
Mhm.
you think?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We're seeing a lot more. I mean, with social media and cell phones that are essentially mini computers, our children are actually spending a lot more time in front of their screens and a lot less time out running around. Like I remember when I was a kid, it was,
Mhm.
when the street lights come on, come
You
home.
stayed out, right? You stayed out all day. I
You
mean,
stayed out all day. You
and you,
got your
and you
homework
couldn't
done.
run in and out, right? Because
No, no.
you come back in here, you staying in. We was like,
Exactly,
going
exactly. We're not going in and out, but it was an exciting moment to get your homework done and go outside and play.
Mhm.
And I'm finding that less and less children are seeing that they either have that opportunity or choose to do that, right?
Mhm.
But certainly, I'm sensitive to the fact that there are many that live in communities where they do not feel safe to
Right.
go outside
Right.
and
Exactly.
spend a lot of time outside. And
Mhm.
so we're trying to think about alternative ways that they may be able to get more activity. But certainly it's not the same as when I was a child. And so we have to be a little bit more creative and think of how we can keep kids engaged in some sort of activity
Mhm.
so that they're less likely to develop
Mhm.
obesity, dyslipidemia or high cholesterol
Mhm.
or high blood pressure.
Okay. And I want you to speak to some of those things too, before we're done. If you can give our audience some alternatives, because there may be parents listening, women listening, families listening that need some ideas on what they can do to create those opportunities for their children, whether they're in environments where they don't feel safe, or sometimes, like you said, it may not even be that they're not in environments that they're not safe or may not feel safe,
Mhm.
but it could be choices that we're making. And
Yeah.
so maybe if you can give some idea on some ways and things that we can do to help our children become more mobile, or to think along those lines, even as
Yeah.
parents, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the things that the AAP recommends is that children really should have no more than 2 hours of screen time per day, right?
Okay.
So, um, so that's really important to
More
stress.
than 2 hours.
No more than 2 hours of screen time per day, and that's become harder, right? Because
Mhm.
during the pandemic, a lot of
Mhm.
school went to screen time, right?
Mhm.
And so that was a little bit harder to achieve. But I think even if we aren't exact about that, I think the main point is to make sure that we are limiting the amount of screen time that children are having. So what is absolutely necessary to get their homework done, and to achieve their goals for school, let's do that. But then let's limit some of the social time that they're having on their
Mhm.
computers or their phones, and encourage them to get outside and play, right?
Mhm.
Um, or even thinking about this as a family, really a
Mhm.
family affair, because really it
Yeah.
should be, right? Like
Uh-huh.
we're talking, I know in your podcast, you talk a lot about women caring for themselves. Well,
Right.
bring your children along with you, right? It's like it's a family affair. We all need to care for ourselves, and we need to think about our children in this process as well. So if you're going for a walk, everybody goes for a walk.
Right. Family fitness.
It's family fitness, and it's a great opportunity to have conversations with your children, to connect, to hear about their days, similar to the way we use the time around the dinner table,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
To have conversation, to better understand what's going on with our children, and share. I think we can use that as another opportunity to do that. So it's not just, oh, we're going out to get exercise and the focus is on exercise. No, it's the focus is on family time and having
Mhm.
conversations together and getting to know each other and staying connected.
Mhm.
And then before you know it, your 30 minutes to an hour is up, and you can resume the rest of the activities that you have for the evening. And I always tell everyone to start with small goals, right? Like I don't expect
Mhm.
anyone to go out. If we aren't regular exercisers, I don't expect us to go out and all of a sudden, 5 days a week or 7 days a week engage in some sort of physical activity. But let's start with small doable things. Let's say on the weekend that we're going to go walking as a family.
Okay.
And that gives you 2 days right there, and start off with 30 minutes. And
Mhm.
then we work our way up, like
Mhm.
maybe every week we add a little bit more time,
Mhm.
until we get to a point that we're walking 3 days a week for an hour, right? And
Mhm.
then we can start adding in some more days. But it's really about forming habits, good
Yes.
habits,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
at an early age.
Mhm.
And you'll find that I think more children want to engage with their parents and have conversation time with their parents. And it's a way that we can, if you will, kill two birds with one stone, get
Yeah.
exercise and get to know each other. So I like those things.
Yeah.
Um, I also think about, so one is taking away the screen time. Two is to think about doing this as a family and not just putting the onus on children to get out and do things on their own, right?
Okay. Mhm.
Particularly if they may live in a neighborhood where there aren't a lot of other children, then it's important to think about this as a family affair. Um, but then also, if you have means, to think about some of the rec centers and the gyms in your area. Like I know that some of the gyms during the summer offer discounted rates, if not free entry for teenagers,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
That are cleared by their physicians
Yeah.
to exercise. Then they allow them to engage, and that's a way that they can socialize with other children of a similar age group, but at the same time participate in an activity like swimming or basketball, or if they want to do the free weights and stuff, it's an opportunity for them to do that, or walk on the treadmill if they choose. But they tend to have a variety of options for them to engage in. And the local Y, is another option to consider, that has a lot of activities
For children.
specifically geared for children at different age levels. So
Okay. Mhm.
that's something else to think about as well.
And that's so important because even our schools do not have as many physical activities uh,
Absolutely.
programming.
Yeah.
Like we had PE and we had to dress out for
Yeah.
PE, right?
Here, same here.
Right.
Mhm.
And so I don't believe that they have that.
Yeah.
Like
Well, so
that.
as
It's not
funding's been
that
cut,
early anymore.
Yeah, so as funding's been cut, physical education has been one of those things that's been cut. And so a lot of children are experiencing it. Oh, I have it this quarter or this semester, but I'm not going to have it for my next quarter or semester.
Mhm.
And so that leaves a downtime where they're not as active. And if they're not being pushed at home to do those things,
Mhm.
then they're not getting it in any other setting.
Mhm.
So it's important to kind of gauge that. If you're noticing, my child doesn't have PE at this point in time, well, maybe we need to find some creative ways to do
Mhm.
some activity at other times and put it into our family schedule.
Mhm.
And even if it's just on the weekends, any little bit
Mhm. Mhm.
really counts. Right?
And that a thing we could begin to think about is how can other organizations come alongside families to help, since funding has been cut in our
Mhm.
schools concerning physical education. But what kind of programs could we, other organizations, our
Yeah,
churches and other nonprofit organizations, even our sororities and fraternities,
absolutely.
perhaps we could come in and help support families with providing opportunities for children to do um, physical activities.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that there's a role for everyone to play and care. We talk about it taking a village, and it really does take a village to care for our children, right? And we need to think about this at a community level. This is really something that, because you consider the fact that cardiovascular disease affects particularly the African American community disproportionately, right?
Mhm.
And so when we think about that, and we think about the fact that the process of developing the risk factors really starts in childhood, then this really becomes a community issue, right? And we talk about this as being
Right.
a public health issue, but we know that frequently we have to take ownership of this within our own communities. So
Exactly.
I definitely encourage, to encourage churches, community organizations, and everyone really to think about how we can be a part. And we're thinking about this in so many different ways. Like we're thinking about this we're thinking about their education. We're thinking about I know some organizations are focused on neonatal mortality and maternal health and things like that. And these are all important. There's room for us to take on so much more
Yeah.
in terms of caring for our community
Churches.
and for our children.
Now, you talked about the physical education aspect. Can you talk a little bit about the nutrition and how
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
impacting children's heart?
Yeah. So, one of the things that we have noticed as well is that as we talk about funding for schools and such,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. All right.
School lunch is not what it used to be
Yeah.
either. Right?
Exactly.
And more of it, when I ask children, okay, well, what are you eating for lunch? It's the pizza, it's the chicken nuggets, it's the kind of fast food types of things
Mhm.
that are being served in school. And so now our children are getting more and more saturated fat into their diet, right?
Mhm.
We also know that, when we look at some of our communities and we do a scan around the community and see what's available in terms of fresh fruits and vegetables to
Mhm.
eat,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
That in a lot of places that's lacking, right?
Mhm.
But what is there are a lot of the fast food restaurants that have the dollar menus and the cheap foods that are not nutritious, right? That are fun
Mhm.
to eat and tasty, but
Mhm.
not nutritious that are available. And so we're seeing more and more that children aren't eating healthy like they should. And so I think that we have to start being more mindful of what they're putting on their plates. We have to be mindful of what we are cooking in our homes as well,
Mhm.
and trying to do a little less frying, right? How can we season our food but not give them as much salt in
Mhm.
their diet?
Mhm.
So it starts really at home and thinking
Yeah.
about how we're preparing meals in our home,
Mhm.
and being mindful of the fact that it's not happening at school as we would like. And certainly There have been initiatives to try to improve what children are receiving at school, but there's still a ways to go with that.
Yeah.
So recognizing that if there are opportunities for us to send our children to school with healthier food options, then certainly we should look into that, right? And try to do it.
Okay.
But recognizing that everyone is not able to do that. But then we need to be even more mindful of what they're getting at home, so that we aren't adding to the non-nutritious food that they're receiving. And then if we have the option, I always tell parents, there's some school systems that actually will post what the menu is online.
Okay.
So if you have the opportunity to try to sit with your child and figure out, kind of map out what you think they should eat for the day, hopefully they will get into the habit of, okay, these are the healthier things that I should pick and eat. But certainly you have a little less control at school, but definitely more control at home. And I think we probably need to try to take back control of that as well.
Okay.
But I do recognize this. I'm not naive to the fact that this is really a public health issue that we really need to think about at higher levels. That what's affordable for families to purchase that may not have the income to buy all of the fresh fruits and vegetables, because it's not cheap to eat
No, it's
healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we really have to think about this at the public health level, and thinking about how we can make these things more affordable again, right? And think about how we can supply our families with what they need and the building blocks, if you will, in order to provide nutritious meals to our children. So
yeah. So there sounds like there needs to be some more policy
absolutely.
made, more laws made that will help with these. So do you know of any way we can impact that, or what kind of things can we do as citizens to maybe bring these things to the attention of our elected officials and persons who are making these decisions at a higher level?
Yeah. So definitely, these are things that are being thought about in a lot of the cardiovascular organizations. So things like the American Heart Association, the American College of Cardiology. We're thinking about these things, and particularly with the paper that recently came out describing cardiac kidney metabolic syndrome, right?
Okay.
And acknowledging that this is a process that starts in childhood. I think this is going to actually lead to even more advocacy in this space, and that it says that as members of societies that are focused on the heart, that we have to think about these things as we are connecting with our government officials. So I think if you have the opportunity to link with these organizations, because I do feel that there's power in numbers, right? Certainly you can call on your own, but when there are opportunities to have days at the Capitol, right? With the American Heart Association or with the American College of Cardiology, that we try to take advantage of those opportunities because they're able to provide you with statistics to put in your pocket, and or to put on your phone, I guess more so nowadays, in order to help you drive the conversation. And then they're also going to put their resources that they put behind it. So I would highly recommend connecting with organizations that exist that are doing this lobbying at a higher level.
Yeah. So I'm wearing the Go Red sweatshirt. It's a part of my fitness apparel with my self-care network. We have several designs, but this particular one I designed in partnership with Georgia State Representative Doreen Carter. She does a Go Red for Women campaign, heart health initiative, but she also is just looking at heart health for our community, for African American communities at large in the state of Georgia, and for Georgians, period. And so so I think 3 years ago she had me come and speak on self-care, the connection between self-care and heart health. So I told her, I said, I want to really get in there with you. So this year I helped to sponsor the event, was one of the sponsors for the event. And so I've been asking everyone, if they buy the red sweatshirt, to do that because I'm using the proceeds from this sweatshirt
Mm-hmm.
to help her sponsor the event that she's doing
Mm-hmm.
to educate our community.
Mm-hmm.
So it's things like that. When you say get involved with organizations, finding a way to connect with, and here she is. She's at the State House. She's
Yeah,
in those meetings. She's helping to create policy and laws. So partner with those who are at the table, right?
absolutely.
So because I
Absolutely.
right, there's strength in numbers.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And it's certainly, I always encourage everyone to do what they can at the individual level, but we
Yeah,
move so much further when
we're
we work
better. Yeah,
together. And when those who are involved in making policy know that this is important to a larger group,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
It's harder to push it to the side and not think about it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So we really do need to come to the table as a group, and we may have different approaches to doing this, and that's fine. But I think the message really needs to be that we recognize that this is the number one killer of Americans, in particular women, and Black women are at a high risk for this.
yeah,
And that message, no matter what we do, we need to do something.
yeah,
And whether it be through research, whether it be funding more research, or developing programs that are community based, and work with communities to increase activity or provide safe spaces to engage in activity. We need to think about all of these things, and really that's what's going to take us to the next level. But the first step is to make people aware that this is something that we care about,
mhm,
and we're not going to sit down and be quiet until we start to see some
yeah,
change and movement in the right direction.
yes. And I think a big part of it is educating our community. We perish for the lack of knowledge, right?
Mhm.
And we perish also, I believe, from the lack of action. And
Mhm.
so I think by making these things aware, like in just my conversation with you offline, you made me more aware of heart disease, because when I think of heart disease, I'm always thinking of adults, right?
Mhm.
Talking with you made me realize, and I do know of children who've had heart issues, right?
Mhm.
For various reasons. I remember years ago, we had a young girl in our church that had to have a heart transplant. And I remember us praying for her and
Mhm.
family and all of what went on with that. She had to have several heart surgeries, and then
Mhm.
finally they had to do a transplant and all of
Mhm.
that. She's now a young adult woman. And
What a
so,
blessing. Yeah.
yeah. And so, being um, um, uh, Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, our family have a relationship with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta because they
Mhm.
took care of my niece who was a patient there in 2000. She passed away in 2009, but she was a patient at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta
Mhm.
a number of years, and because she had JRA,
Mhm.
and unfortunately, it impacted her heart. And
Mhm.
so I remember when she had to go on the ECMO machine,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
how
Mhm.
difficult that was for us as a family.
Yeah.
So, but it's still something that I'm not sure is in the forefront of our thinking as a community when it
Mhm.
comes to heart health for
Mhm.
children.
Yeah, yeah, and I think we take that for granted. But I think one of the things that, what we know, and the reason why we focus on this in children. So when we have looked at autopsy studies for children that have passed away for other reasons, right? So maybe
Mhm.
they were in a car accident or something like that. What we've already started to see is that children have started to build up plaques in their coronary arteries. So recall that the coronary arteries are the blood vessels that feed the heart muscle itself. So when you hear about someone having a heart attack, it's because their coronary arteries got obstructed in some way, either a plaque dislodged or a clot or something like that dislodged and obstructed blood flow to the heart muscle. If the heart muscle can't get oxygen, then it can't squeeze, because the heart is a muscle just like every other muscle, right? And so it requires oxygen to function. And if it can't get red blood cells to the muscle of the heart, then that's when you start to have, you're at higher risk for heart attacks and angina and things like that, right? And so what we've noticed is that the first step in that process has already started to develop in children. So that tells us that we need to start in childhood thinking about these things, right? And that we don't need to just wait until children are in their 20s or so, and they transition over to an adult position to start thinking about this. This really is the time to think about it now, so that we can slow this process even more so, and delay the likelihood of them having an early heart attack or a stroke. And for men, an early heart attack or a stroke is any that occurs before 55 years of age. And for women, an early heart attack or stroke is any that occurs before 65 years of age. So if we can get people even further out into their 60s, 70s, before they're even having to really think about this, then that's a blessing, and that's progress. But we know that this process starts now. And with obesity, spreading, if you will, like it is, right? That we're starting to have to think about this more in children. So it really is important for us to be mindful that this is affecting our children. We can't see it, we can't feel it, right? Unless they have severe or a genetic problem that's causing their cholesterol levels to be high, you may not notice anything, right, at all.
So that brings me to another question. What type of screenings do we have for children? I
Yeah.
know for as an adult, when I go for my physical, of course,
Mhm.
they're taking my blood pressure. I'm getting blood tests, looking
Mhm.
at my cholesterol levels, my A1C levels, and all those things, thyroid levels. But with our children, I know they take blood pressures, but
Mhm.
what screenings could we have or do we have for children so that parents can be making sure that their children are getting these screenings
Yeah.
ready?
Yeah. So, we a lot of the same things that we have for adults, we have for children, right? So we can check cholesterol levels just as we do for adults. And if children have no risk factors, so if they don't have like kidney disease or diabetes or thyroid issues, right? We recommend that screening for cholesterol start at 9 to 10 years of age, right? But if there are risk factors, then we're recommending that screening start even sooner. Or if children are obese, then that screening should start even earlier. And that's simple. It's simple blood test that can be done for that, right? Um, Sometimes, depending on the type of screening that your primary care wants to do, they may or may not want you to fast before that blood work is done.
Mhm.
But certainly, if there's anything that comes back abnormal on the non-fasting blood work, then they're going to have you fast to make sure that that is truly a true elevation in your numbers.
Mhm.
So some choose to just have you fast and the first time, so we know where your numbers really fall. But we have the opportunity to do that. We have blood pressure cuffs of all different sizes,
Mhm.
so we can check blood pressures in children, and it's easy to do, particularly from 3 and up. We can check your blood pressure, right?
Mhm.
If your child is obese, and we're thinking about the impact that obesity can also have on your liver,
Mhm.
right? And you
Mhm.
can start to
Exactly.
develop fatty liver disease even in children.
Mhm.
So, your pediatrician can check labs to see what your liver function looks like.
Mhm.
Your pediatrician can also check a hemoglobin A1C, right?
Mhm.
To screen and see if you're at higher risk for diabetes.
Mhm.
So a lot of the same things that we do for adults, we can do that for children. Now, we aren't doing the calcium scoring and things like that the adult cardiologists tend to do. But the things that we're thinking about in terms of cholesterol, diabetes,
Mhm.
thyroid dysfunction, and high blood pressure, we can screen for that in children as well.
Okay.
So it's not just something that we can do for adults.
So that means our children need to be getting their physicals regularly.
Absolutely.
To be,
Absolutely.
yeah, they need to. And
Absolutely.
I'm past that age. My children, but I'm one of those moms that everything was on the calendar. My kids had their annual physicals, they had their dentist appointments twice a year. I mean, I was a stickler, and now I'm a grandma, so I'm like on my son and my daughter-in-law. Make sure he has his appointments, which they're doing good. But it takes that being, it takes that. Now, sometimes I know it can be difficult getting off work, taking
Mhm.
children to appointments and
Mhm.
things of that nature. But it's so important that we help our children maintain their health. So what kind of things can be done for parents that may not be able to get to regular appointments, have to take off work? Do you know of any programs or anything that can help families that may even have issues with getting regular screenings?
Well, one thing I would say is to look into whether or not your pediatrician's office offers either after hours or weekend hours, because a lot more pediatricians are offering that in the past than they did in the past, which offers an opportunity for those who are at work and having difficulty taking off to still keep their care with their same physician. So that's one thing to make sure to look into. The other thing to recognize is that the health department does offer screenings and well child checks on a sliding scale, right? So depending on what your income is, then you can potentially get care there as well. And there are great physicians that work in that space. Um, so those are different ways that you might be able to still interact with a physician.
Mhm.
There is a lot more going towards telemedicine and telehealth, but I do think that there's still a lot that needs to be done where a physician actually puts their stethoscope on you, they're looking you over, they're feeling your skin, making sure that you don't have like plaques and things that could be a sign that you have, like, for instance, I think about this from my standpoint as familial hypercholesterolemia, right? And some that have really severe high cholesterol levels may have develop bumps on their body that are actually cholesterol deposits, right?
Wow.
So there is something to be said for getting in front of someone and letting them give you a thorough examination. And so, although we have increased telemedicine quite a bit, and I think that works well for a lot of follow-up things or some smaller things, like I have a cold or something like that, I do think it's very important for you to get in front of a physician. And I would definitely look to see if your pediatrician offers after hours or weekend hours, or if not, then if there's a practice that does, because there are practices that offer that around the city. And then also look into if you're having difficulty, think about about your local health center
Yeah.
that might be able to offer.
Yeah. I know, and plan it. Maybe, I know for me, when I would at least the first day or so of spring break, summer break, things like that, Christmas break, I
Mhm.
made sure the kids had, whatever appointments they needed, because sometimes you don't want to take them out of school or
Right.
whatever. So I would plan it before we go off to play or go on, go to Disney. Let's
Yeah.
go to the doctor first, so we don't,
Yes. Yes.
and then
It,
we can finish the rest of this week at Disney or wherever we go on, or at home, or whatever we're gonna do. But I think the issue is prioritizing their
It
health.
is. You have to prioritize it. You have to prioritize it. And I think, that's a great approach, is to think about the holidays. That's a very busy time at the
Yeah,
pediatrician's office. You can always tell when school's about to start because that's a really busy time, or when there's a break, that's a really busy time as well. So you definitely want to plan in advance if you're going to do that, right?
yeah,
But I always tell people an easy way to remember is just at the birthday. When it's
yeah,
your birthday,
yeah,
it's time for you to go get your checkup. And it's about more than just shots. I think some people equate it to, well, we don't need our immunizations until this point in time, so we don't need to go. But I think that there's a lot more that your pediatrician can offer you in those in between shot times as well.
mhm,
And there's a lot of counseling that takes place and a lot of screening that takes place, even when you're not there for your immunizations. And I
mhm,
think there's something to be said even for getting your sports physicals, with trying to get that done with your pediatrician, because that's somebody that knows you, right?
uh-huh,
Um, and not to say that the urgent cares and stuff aren't doing a great job. They are. There's so many that we appreciate their help with that they're providing. But there is something to be said for somebody that knows you, that sees you every year, and knows a lot about who you are and what your issues are and what you need to address. Being able to follow with them and having your sports physicals, if possible, done with that person is very helpful.
And
So the
it's
continuity of care.
a relationship too. I think with your pediatrician, it's a really and my children, my oldest son is 27,
Mm-hmm.
our middle son is 25, and our
Mm-hmm.
daughter is 24.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that blessed me so much, our grandson is 2 months old, and the pediatrician that took care of my son and my daughter-in-law, I didn't even realize until later on that she had the same pediatrician at Kaiser.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, Dr. Charmaine Gray is my grandson's pediatrician. So she's literally taking care of a child that she took care.
Yes.
It could be a transgenerational relationship. That's what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that person then knows your family history, right?
Yeah.
And you're not having to go and explain everything all over to someone new. They know what's going on, and they know, oh, well, this runs in their family, right? And I need to screen for this. And you may forget to tell them something one year, but they've got it in their chart to know that this is what I need to think about as we go forward, or be mindful of, because this is something that's going on in their family. So there is something to be said for someone that's caring for multiple generations of your family, because there is that special relationship and knowledge that they have that provides a unique perspective on your own personal health care. So
it's amazing. Thank you. Wow, Dr. Michelle, thank you so much for coming in and having this conversation with us. I want to let people know where they can find you if they're looking for, if there is some issues going on, or would like to maybe follow up with you later or whatever, get some advice, or come in and see you, bring their children to you, whatever, however it works at Children's.
So if you would like to see me, I'm with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta Cardiology. And so you can go to kidsheart.com is a little bit more of the where we give a little bit more educational information on that website. But if you are looking to connect with us in terms of scheduling an appointment, you can do that by going to www.choa.org and looking at, you can search my name even. So Michelle Wallace, MD, or if you go to, thank you. And you can also just go to the cardiology section and find myself and all of my partners there, because we are spread all around the metro Atlanta area, as well as we have offices in, oh goodness, we have offices in Albany, we have offices in Gainesville, Athens. So we are spread all around Georgia. So if I'm not convenient,
I'm going to put the CHOA website up there as well, because I had the KidSmart.
Kidsheart.com. Yeah. And there's a lot of our blogs about heart health go on that website. But the other thing I can offer is our phone number as well for scheduling appointments, which is 404-256-2593. And that's for Children's Healthcare of Atlanta Cardiology. And that's 404-256-2593.
Okay, so I'm going to add this up here. Is it choa.org?
It is www.choa.org. Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
I'll put that on here. For those of you that are, if you're listening and not watching on YouTube, you need to be watching on YouTube, because I really would love for you to be a part of, to be able to watch these podcast episodes. But you also can listen on Spotify. Sometimes people are listening as they're walking or cooking or whatever. But I always invite people to go to the YouTube channel. But CHOA, CHOA.org, for those of you who are listening. And the phone number is 404-256-2593. So if you're not on YouTube and you're listening on Spotify, I wanted to spell that out and call that number out for you. But it is on the screen if you go to the YouTube channel. And make sure that you share this information. Wow, this is good good information for our community. And I'm so grateful to have a sister that can educate us and keep us informed. And I appreciate what you do and all of you and the work that you do at CHOA. CHOA is a special place. It is just a special
It
organization.
is. It's a fun place to work. I mean, what better way to spend your day than caring for the future, right? And caring for our kids. So I consider it an honor to be able to work in that space. I consider it an honor that parents entrust me with the care of their children. And I also consider it an honor that you asked me to speak on this today, because this is something that I'm passionate about, is making sure that we are caring for the hearts of our children, and having a better understanding that the things that we're dealing with in adulthood, a lot of this stems from what we experienced as children. And if we can change the narrative and encourage our children to get out, play, spend more time doing activity, if we can do this as a family, if we can cut back on the salt that we're eating, if we can cut back on the saturated fat and the fried foods, and the non-nutritious snacks, and focus on how we can have tasty, healthful things, I think will go a long way to putting me out of business at some point, right? Like that would be ideal, right? The ideal thing is to put me out of business. Put me out of business. I don't want to have to be a preventive cardiologist, right? I want to have this be in the realm of the pediatrician who says, great, we're doing this, you're taking care of yourself and we're on top of it. And you don't need the cardiologist, right? To step in and start to think about putting you on medication and such. So I really want people to put me out of a job. I'll focus on the congenital heart disease stuff. And I'll focus on the genetic stuff that, there's some things that are genetic, and there's no way that that lifestyle alone will take care of it. And those are the things that I'm fine with taking with. But if there's preventable things that we can do, if we decide as a community that we're going to do this in a different way, then let's do it. Put that part of my job to rest. I'm okay.
I love that. I love that approach. The
Yeah.
preventable things. Yeah, let's give her a break. Let's give all our cardiologists a break, adult and pediatric. By doing what we can do.
Yes.
Doing what we can do. And I tell people that, my main work is that of a pastor. So I'm a theologian. I'm a pastor. And I tell people all the time, listen, God, let's not make God do what we can do, right? Let's not ask God to do what we can do. God gives us spiritual agency. He's given us all things pertaining to life and godliness, and he's given us what we need. And of course, there are things that happen that we have no control over.
Absolutely.
Right. And those are the things we want to pray about. Those are the things we want to give to God. But the things that we can do something about, let's do something about it. And let's educate, inspire, motivate, and bring our community along with us. Right.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm so grateful. I just want to do one other thing, and I'm gonna let you give us one final word as we sign off. But I do want to let everybody know that you are watching or listening to the Harmonize Your Life Conversations on Self-Care for Women of Color podcast. You can find us on Spotify, on Google, Apple, Anchor podcasts. You can also go to my YouTube channel at Dr.Toni G. Alvarado. And I'm asking that you please watch these videos and share them with our community. These are life-changing and life-altering conversations that we're having on this podcast. We're not gossiping and running anybody down in our community. We are doing work to lift up our community and to make our community healthier spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, relationally, occupationally, all things self-care, health, and wellness. And you help us do that by sharing these podcast conversations with your family members, with your friends, with your community. Also, when you go and you subscribe to this YouTube channel, you help us to go up in the analytics with Google, in the Google search engine, so that when people are looking for information like this, they don't have to search all the way down 5 pages. The more you like, the more you subscribe, the more you share and comment on these conversations, you help this podcast come up in the Google search and in the analytics on YouTube. So please do that. Help us do that. Help us raise our numbers and our analytics by sharing and commenting on these podcast conversations. Go to my website at drtonyalvarado.com and purchase the red hoodie, the red sweatshirt, the red hoodie. I told you we're going to donate proceeds from the sale of the red hoodies to the Go Red campaign, sponsored by Georgia State Representative Doreen Carter. We're donating proceeds from the sale of these items to her educational initiative around heart health for our community. And so when you do that, you help us make those donations possible. So do that for us, and we will be glad to make those donations on your behalf. I also want ladies to know that you can get ready to go with us to Costa Rica. You can go to my website and register for the Harmonize Your Life Women's Self-Care Retreat 2025. We're going to Costa Rica, and I'll say more about that as we sign off. And you can go to the website and get the information on what you can do to come with us to Costa Rica. All right, Dr. Wallace, I'm going to pull myself out for a second, and I just want you to give us one final word.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Toni, for having me on. I just want to say to everyone that as we think about caring for ourselves, let us not forget about caring for our families as well. They're our legacy, they're our future, and we want to make sure that our children in particular stay healthy and do not have to, as we always say, we want to give them better than what we had. And so as you are making day-to-day decisions to make yourself healthier, to get out and take control of your diet, your exercise, and knowing your numbers, let's do the same for your children. And let's let Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and in particular, since I'm with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta Cardiology, let Children's Healthcare of Atlanta Cardiology be a partner in the care of your children's hearts. So thank you so much for this opportunity. And I look forward to partnering in the future on many future endeavors. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We look forward to having you again. Thank
Awesome.
you. Thank you. All right, everybody, we're getting ready to sign off here. But before we do, I want you to pay attention to this very, very special announcement that is coming your way, right? One of the objectives of the Harmonize Your Life Women's Self-Care Retreat is to provide women an opportunity to travel, rest, renew, refresh, and experience the beauty of other places in the world. Therefore, I am excited to announce the 8th annual Harmonize Your Life Women's Self-Care Retreat will be hosted in beautiful Costa Rica. Ladies, get ready to pack your bags and join me January 9th through the 13th, 2025 at Dreams Las Mareas Resort and Spa, set within the tropical rainforest on Playa El Jabo, with lush landscapes and stunning views from every corner of the resort. Come with your sisters, mothers, aunts, daughters, nieces, and girlfriends to be coached, trained, and taught by women who are professionally qualified to help us strategize and create the harmonious lifestyles we need and desire. Because harmony doesn't just happen, we make it happen. Get registered today. Take advantage of early registration discounts. Make sure you have a valid passport, because we're taking the Harmonize Your Life Women's Self-Care Retreat to Central America in beautiful Costa Rica. Don't miss it. All right. All right. So I got a chance to share that. I'm still working through all this technical stuff, y'all. So y'all bear with me. But anyway, y'all got the message. Come on and go with us to Costa Rica. We look forward to seeing you on the next Harmonize Your Life Women Conversations on Self-Care for Women of Color podcast with your host, Dr. Toni G. Alvarado. See you soon.